session. You know that I always put the sessions there in the platform in case that you would like to check again the video, you will have access to it. Okay, thank you. So today we're still checking the assessment, right? Last class, we talked about the assessment, the definition, and some characteristics that involves how can we assess the students. In this time, we're going to talk about the types of assessment, all right? So first of all, I would like you to think about what types of assessment can we apply to our students, right? So if you have any idea about some assessment types, you can put there in the chat, or if you want to talk, feel free to do it, right? I will give you just a minute.
Hello, Miss.
Hello, Selena.
Miss, monitoring can be considered as a type of assessment?
Actually, yes, monitoring it's a one type of assessment, but we need to consider that when we monitor our students, we are listening to the production, but also you are taking notes, right? Assessment means that some students needs a grade, right? Sometimes we can put, for example, an 80, a 90, or 95, 100, but another type of assessment is the feedback. So you monitor your students because they are going to have a feedback afterwards. Mm-hmm. So that is one, very good.
Thank you, Miss.
You're welcome, Selena. I don't know if anyone else has another idea.
Teacher, another one could be like an exam.
Exactly. Another type of assessment is an exam. Very good, Karime. This is a very traditional way to assess your students, right? We have the written exams, and also we're going to talk about the oral exams, right? Very good for your participation. Let me explain you more about it. So we have three types of assessment. The first one is the formative. We have another one that is summative, and the alternative, right? So we have even more. We have more assessments, but these ones are the most important that I consider that were very interesting. Okay, so I'm going to explain you what are the characteristics of each one of them. So let's start with the formative. So the formative is used during the learning process. For example, if we think about the ECRIF, you can see that, for example, in the encounter and clarify, the teacher is providing the information. Students are doing exercises, participating with the group or with the teacher, the interaction teacher-student or student-student, but there the teacher is monitoring them, right? In the ECRIF, you're always monitoring your students in each of the stages, right? That's why we talked about the accuracy. It means that from the encounter and either to the remembering or the internalize, their students are practicing the accuracy, right? Because then from the internalize and the fluency, they start producing the language thanks to the fluency stage, right? So here, the formative is monitoring them before the fluency stage. You're always there, you're giving feedback, you're clarifying questions, you're clarifying pronunciation words, right? So the teacher is always there. And here we have the provides feedback on the learning process. And it's dialogue based. It means that the speaking is involved, right? Actually, students are producing the language. There they can create the teacher can create a role play or a discussion, but the teacher is listening to that production. And we have the summary. So here is just at the end of the learning process. What does it mean? It evaluates the students' learning. For example, if it is graded, it could be an exam. So for example, in the English courses, some of the schools, they would rather apply an exam, a written exam. In other schools, they apply the oral exams. So that depends on the school and also of the teacher. If you consider that written exam is going to evaluate all of the learning that they acquired, go ahead. If you consider that you would like to assess the students, you would like to evaluate by an speaking exam, it's good. Why? Because if you started teaching them how to speak, you need to evaluate them according to the skill that you taught. So here are some characteristics about the formative and the summative, right? So just to consider that the summary is going to be at the end of the lessons that we have the exams. And the formative, the feedback is during the lessons, always providing comments to the student, like, you know what, maybe you will consider choosing this word instead of this one, or you know what, the pronunciation of this word is the opposite. Giving them feedback during the learning process, and the summary is at the end, right? It could be a quiz, an exam, an oral grade. And then we have the other one that is the alternative, and I'm going to explain you more. Here I have a quote from a theory, and it says, effective assessments give students feedback on how well they understand information, on what they need to improve, while helping teachers better design instruction. Okay? Think about this quote, think about this phrase. What do you understand about this? Okay, so if you would like to share something about this quote, it would be great. Okay, so did you think about the quote? Did you think about these sentences? So what did you understand about this one? Do you have an experience about some teachers? Yes?
Teacher, can I say something?
Yes?
I really liked this quote. I like that everything that is involved in the classroom, it is not only focused on the student, it also focuses on the teacher. I think now that I am like kind of understanding that assessment, it is not only to assess students, but also assess how well you are delivering your instructions and your tasks. If you see that most of in the assessment, if you see that most of your students are not developing well, maybe that's because you didn't plan that well, so you have to redesign the task. So it also helps the teacher.
Exactly, Selena. Thank you. So basically, yes, sometimes we have this expectation that assessment is just to put a grade to the student and that's it. But also this is a reflection of your teaching, right? So if you have 20 students and 15 of them, they are not learning, it means that something is happening in your instruction, something is happening in the way that you're teaching, right? So this is helping both parts, the student, but also the teacher. Thank you so much, Selena. Here I have a comment from Jesus. Feedback can give one a better understanding or a big picture. Yes. So basically, at the end, some of schools assess teachers. It means that they create like an evaluation for the teacher. Students take that evaluation. Well, you have this experience with Lely, and they can grade the teachers. They can put comments there. And also that students they are part of our teaching process, right? If something is not working, you need to change the technique that you're using. Okay, don't stick with one technique, don't stick with one method or approach. Try to be flexible with that, because some students are not going to work with that one, or maybe you need to change it. So that is basically the alternative assessment. And also the alternative involves the authentic and comprehensive tasks. Okay, so it means that the tasks that you are going to assess your students has to be very meaningful. Some of them could be like an open-ended questions, like an interview, or written compositions in case that you thought before a writing session and you would like to assess your students, maybe a written composition, it could be great for them to be assessed, right? And here we have the oral presentations or projects. Some schools or some classes, they are not willing to let the student to present the project, but we need to consider to put it in our curriculum, right? So if you're teaching English, that would be a great option if you want to grade them. An oral presentation, that would be very good. It will be very interesting about themselves. And we need to consider that something that we're teaching, remember, the skill that you're teaching is going to be the skill that is going to be assessed. And another thing is that assessment becomes even more relevant when students become involved in their own assessment. So here, remember that in the feedback, you can give the feedback. It means that teacher to student, and also they can give feedback student, right? So for example, and also we have the other one that is the self-evaluation, the self-assessment. When I was learning English, I had one book of English, and at the end of the book, they had like a self-assessment, and it had like, for example, today I learned verbs, and they were like 1, 2, 3. The number 1 was like, no, I didn't learn anything. The number 2 was like so, and the number 3 was like, yes, I did it. I learned at least 5 verbs, right? So I had to paint the number, or we have some smiley faces, right? That would be a criteria, like assessment, like a rubric. And they can assess themselves, right? The self-evaluation or the peer evaluation. So we have a lot of things that we can assess our students. And I'm going to share you some examples. You can assess your students by telling them to create essays, interviews, performance tasks, exhibitions, portfolios, journals, tests, like Karime said, rubrics, we have rubrics there, the self or peer evaluation, right? So try to be creative when you are going to assess your students, right? Sometimes we consider that if we're teaching speaking, you give the lesson and that's it. But also assessment is part of it, right? You can assess your students maybe in the other class, in the next class, or in 2 classes, right? Maybe providing them an interview, right? But try to be, try to consider that assessment is very important and it's part of your teaching life. So here, basically the students takes an active role in developing the scoring criteria. They can create a self-evaluation and the goal setting. Students accept that the assessment is adequately measuring their learning, right? And also they are going to be very aware if they are learning or not. Because some students might go to the English classes just to sit down, listen, and that's it. They don't participate, they don't care. But you're giving the techniques, you're giving the activities, you're giving material to that student. But if you give them an assessment, if you tell your students, you know what, next class, you're going to present a project or you're going to talk about your hobbies, right? There, the student will be aware that, you know what, I'm not prepared. And that will mean that I need to take, make an effort for next classes because I'm not learning, right? And there, the student is going to be aware, right? If that student is learning or not. So I don't know if you had any experience when you learn English, but we have here different settings how to assess speaking. For example, it was the performing in front of your students, of your classmates, or the teacher had to tell you to record yourself, right? Record yourself, and I'm going to evaluate you later. Or in this case, because we are in quarantine, you can evaluate your students by computer, right? By a Zoom meeting or a recording, right? These are the ways that you can also assess your students. Could be a recording or talking in front of the classroom or talking between pairs, between groups, right? We have a lot of things. Una disculpa si se escucha ahí el ruidazo afuera. Then we have the that assess speaking is not only the exam forms, also you can create interviews that we said before, the oral presentations, the group discussions, right? Just to consider that, for example, in the interviews, and we have two persons there, like for example, yourself as a teacher and two students, right? They are there interviewing themselves. You are asking the question, one student answers, and then the other one, you can create that one. The oral presentation, that is one student presenting a class. Or the group discussion, you can put your students in groups of 3, in groups of 4, and you are there monitoring them and actually listening if they are actually talking about the topic, if they are producing something. So my question for you is, have you had any experience with this kind of assessments? To be like an interview or a presentation or the group discussion?
I think I mean, the most recent one that I've had, it was the Let's Talk, because teacher Michelle was going to assess our speaking in that presentation.
Okay, very good. And did you like that assessment, Karime?
Kind of.
Kind of, okay. Very good. Yes, as you can see, teacher Michelle actually made an assessment there. It was the oral presentation. We need to be very aware of the type of students that we have. So, for example, if you consider that your students might feel comfortable in an interview, just two people there with you, okay, try to apply that one. Or if you consider that your students are very participative, they want to talk, they really want to share information, it could be the group discussion or the oral presentation, right? So that is your own perspective as a teacher. What could work with your students? Because not everyone is the same. And you can have 3 groups, but each one of the groups is going to be very different, right? So you need to consider that kind of assessment. Okay, so here I have more examples for you. For example, it could be like describing something. Students can describe a picture, a place, a person, or an action. Right? For example, if you taught present continuous before, that would be a great assessment. You can take a picture there and they are talking about what they can see, what is happening in that picture. Or they can tell you a story, right? According to some pictures that you have there, or they can invent one, right? Here we have the comparing things. They can compare. If you taught comparative superlatives, well, you can take fruit, realia, or pictures, or the videos, right? That depends on you. Or giving personal information. Not that personal information, but talking about hobbies, experiences, holidays, right? And I don't know if you're noticing, but in eCRIF, we are creating these activities, right? As you can see, eCRIF is a part of assessment. We're assessing the students in each of the stages. So another question for you, and I would like you more people to participate. Which one would you find useful for assessment and why? Which one would you consider that, maybe this assessment will be great for my students?
I think it would depend on what I want to assess. Maybe if I want to assess like adjectives or how well they have learned them, I will use to describe something. And if I wanted to test like how well they are inventing and creating stuff, I will use the telling a story.
Okay, very good, Karime. Yes, basically you can adapt the assessment with your own style. And for example, if you, as you said, if you taught a topic before, that would be a great assessment. For example, describing. And here, Jenny, I have describing something because they can use a lot of vocabulary. Just we need to consider the level of the students, right? Consider that at beginner level, they can describe something, but just isolated words. You need to provide them the supportive language in that case. Here, Ale, I think I will use describing something or giving personal information. I think if I use telling a story, it's going to be more like assessing reading. Okay, and actually, if you want them to create a story, it's there you're assessing writing because maybe they need to write, and there, if you already taught a writing lesson, that will be a very good assessment. Very good. Thank you for your participation. Okay, so I don't know, before, yes, Paulina, I will use personal information for an icebreaker. Wow, okay, yes. Well, be careful with the questions because once I had an experience with a teacher. The teacher was asking some personal questions and the students were uncomfortable, right? Just to consider what kind of personal information you're going to ask, right? Very good, Paulina. So before telling you the assignment, do you have any questions from this topic? We're going to wrap up this topic, assessment. So I don't know if you have any questions, doubts, or experiences. Jenny, everything clear? Okay. Jesus, very exactly. We need to be very careful about the questions. Okay, what about the rest of my students here? Ale, Selena, Karimel, Leslie, Natalia, Paulina.
Something that I forgot to mention about the last slide, the telling a story, is that maybe to not make it just as a reading thing, as Ale said, we could make like create a story on the spot, like in that moment, come up with a story, like with no previous writing or anything. Just give them a topic and they have to create a story. But I mean, you have to consider the level, like they have to be super, well, not super advanced, but in an intermediate level.
Exactly. Actually, Karime, I applied that one, and the level of the students were intermediate to advanced, and they created amazing stories. Of course, I had to tell them some transitive words like first, then, finally, because they didn't remember. But they created good stories, and that's another amazing assessment, right? Creating in the spot, right? To see how the creativity works. Thank you, Karime. Here I have more comments. Natalia, I think using really useful context and context they can use in a...
Teacher.
Yes.
Can I, may I talk?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So, for example, whenever they are telling stories or, yeah, like if they, and if this is for like speaking, right? Yes, I think like if you give them a purpose, that's what I meant, like give them but not a purpose like something that they will not use, you know, like they have to speak but for their personal purposes or context that already happened, so they do not struggle talking, you know.
Yes.
Am I being clear?
Like connecting the context, right? If you
Yeah.
if you ask your students like, tell me about another topic that maybe they don't know, so they won't speak, right? So this is a good idea, Natalia, creating topics that they are involved, that they know, that they are familiar with, right? If you start asking about a topic that, well, maybe they don't know, or if you are teaching teenagers and you asked teenagers about Mexico's history, or I don't know, or something related about that, maybe they will be like, I don't know what you're talking about, teacher. I don't know how to participate because I don't know. So you need to know your students in order for you to choose the topics and to choose the context, right? Thank you, Natalia. And here I have more. Ale, Karime, a good activity can be when they are in a circle and they need to continue the story. With that, we can evaluate vocabulary, grammar, and creativity. Karime agrees with Ale, and Ale sends hearts. Very good. Actually, yes. We have a lot of type of assessments. Just we need to consider, again, level of the students, the background knowledge, vocabulary that they know, and also if you consider to give them supportive language, please apply it, right? So they can talk. In this case, we're in teaching speaking. You need your students to produce, to say something, produce sentences, short sentences, longer sentences, but you're there guiding them to that production. Thank you for your participation, guys. I appreciate it. So here I'm going to explain you the task, the assignment that you have. So as you can see, I always put forums. Why? Because it's easier for me to know if you're participating, and also you can see, for example, Ale's participation, Karime's, Celina's, Jenny's, and you can read them, right? And you can have more knowledge about it. So in this case, here we have some assessment videos. It means that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different videos. As you can see here, we have some real students, and the teacher is interviewing them. You are going to choose one of the videos. That is going to be your decision. Here you have the names, so you can click on the link, and you are going to have access to that video. But also, you're not going to only watch the video, right? You are going to answer these questions according to the video that you are watching. Okay, so for example, here we have what's the background knowledge of the students. So think about if they are producing something in the interviews because they learn it in the classroom. Okay, so what have they been practicing in their classes? What topics? So as you can see, this is a reflective video, reflective questions, because you are going to be the one that is going to be watching how is the teacher assessing those kind of students. I think this is the Cambridge, yes, a Cambridge Association, I guess. I don't remember, yes. A Cambridge assessment. And it means that they are legit, right? They are real. Real students, a real teacher asking questions to the students. Here in this video, you are going to have more idea on how you can assess your students. After you write your own forum, you are going to comment to 3 different partners. Okay? So make sure that you provide good explanations. If you want to include your own experiences, go ahead. I really like that you connect the experiences that you had by learning English with the theory. So I don't know if you have any questions with this assignment.
Teacher.
Yes.
When is the due date for this assignment?
Good question, Paulina. Let me check real quick. Let me share my screen. Let me see in the platform. No le puse fecha límite. 24th, May 24th.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to put it here. I'm giving you I'm giving you time because I know that you have the speaking essay.
Yeah.
Next week, I'm going to have a session with all of you again, just to wrap up some questions that you might have. And also, I'm going to have an individual session, well, here with me, but like an individual. I don't know if I'm explaining myself. For you to explain me what is the topic about, just to give you just some feedback about the essay. And if you have any questions about it, you can ask me, all right? So if you don't have any doubts, any questions, you are free to go.
Thank you, Miss.
No, thank you.